Well, we're used to doing this on Wednesdays, but it is Tuesday. We're coming at you a little bit earlier here this week. Welcome into GC Live, everybody. Kendall Smith here, joined alongside Jack Veltri. Jack is coming from us live in Nashville, Tennessee. Jack, you've had a long day, and it actually looks like right now you are sitting in the media room at Bridgestone.
I am. So it's you're right, Kendall. It's been a very, very long day. I've been up, I was telling you before, I've been up since like 4:30 this morning and made the 7-hour drive out here to Nashville. And yeah, I mean it's
Look at
pretty
that.
pretty empty in here right now. So I feel comfortable enough to not disturb the peace in here and do the live stream. But no, I'm happy to be here in Nashville and ready for some men's basketball in the SEC tournament this week.
We get a live look at what's going on in the media room in Nashville right now. And as you just alluded to, we'll be talking about men's basketball here in just a little bit on GC Live. They've got a big matchup tomorrow afternoon against Arkansas. But before we get into everything else, we're going to talk women's basketball. We're going to talk a little baseball as well, Jack. Let's give a shout out to our presenting sponsor here on GC Live.
Yeah, so if you're watching live right now, you'll see his info right above us here. I'm talking about Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. If you're in the market to buy a home or you just need help with your mortgage, but you have no idea where to begin, got good news for you. Clint is your guy to get in contact with. He'll take you through the process step by step and help you along the way. He's the right guy for the job, as he's been in the mortgage industry for more than 20 years. He's a lifelong Gamecock fan, and he's also a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central and all of our Gamecock Central live programs. So if you're interested, give him a call, 803-422-6797. The NMLS number for him is 71597, or you can go to clinthammond.com for more info.
We appreciate Clint and all that he does for Gamecock Central, for GC Live. He truly is the best. Thank you so much, Clint, and be sure to hit him up if you need anything regarding your mortgage, your house, all of it. But Jack, I'm curious because you just said you woke up at 4:30 this morning. So what has your day looked like in detail?
Well, I didn't know what time I really wanted to leave, honestly. I was just thinking, like, let's just leave early because the central time zone stuff will mess me up. And then I'm like, all right, we're just going to go straight to practice because South Carolina had their open practice earlier this afternoon. And then I ended up getting here a lot earlier than expected, like maybe like a little bit before 11 Central Time. So I went and checked in the hotel, and then by the time I got done with that, I headed straight over here to Bridgestone Arena, and yeah, been hanging out. They didn't have lunch or anything set up, so I was kind of like SOL. I was just like, I'm hungry. That's why I came here early and feel like I wasted my time, but I did end up eating something at the arena. Luckily, they have a restaurant that's open here and stuff inside, so nothing to worry about there. But yeah, it's been busy, and then watching Arkansas practice, South Carolina practice, talking to Lamont Paris, Colin Murray Boyles, BBV, and then now I did a story just a moment ago, and that'll be up here soon on the site. And now talking to you. So nice, busy day.
GamecockCentral.com. Jack putting in the work. As always, we'll get updates on what he saw at those open practices for South Carolina and for Arkansas's men's basketball teams. Jack, last time you were in Nashville, where'd you go? Ruth's Chris or Hall's or something? So I know
we went to
dinner at a steakhouse.
we did go to Hall's last time we were here, but I don't expect that happening this time around. So the media food here, it's pretty good at the SEC tournament. So no disrespect to Vanderbilt, but they didn't have that type of food at their football game. So.
Well, Jack, we are going to talk women's basketball before we get into men's basketball. Shout out to the South Carolina women's team, SEC tournament champs. They rolled in the tournament, taking down Texas in the championship game. Redemption opportunity for South Carolina. We know what happened just a few weeks before that against Texas. So really big for this team to come out and perform so well. And I think the next question, which obviously makes sense on a lot of people's minds, is where is South Carolina going to land? They're going to be a number one seed, but the question is, will they be the overall number one seed for this NCAA tournament? What are you thinking, Jack?
It's a very deep question, just because we know they're going to be a one seed overall, but how much does that top overall seed matter? I don't know if it matters too much, but I do think South Carolina has a really good case. And I think the only other team that could potentially be the top overall seed is the team that they first lost to this season, which was UCLA, all the way back in November. And you look at the metrics and stuff, they're both very good teams. Obviously, 1-2 in the country. And with UCLA, 14-2 in quad one games, 4-0 in quad two. They have some good wins on their resume. Obviously, they just beat USC, Southern Cal, that is, in the Big Ten championship game the other day. So that's always going to be a big win right there, even after losing to them twice this year. But then you look at South Carolina, I think you can argue they have a better resume because they have 16 quad one wins. And yes, they have 3 quad one losses, but they also play a schedule that is harder than anyone in the country. They play the number 1 strength of schedule out there and the number 4 non-conference strength of schedule. You want to look at UCLA, for instance. They have the number 3 strength of schedule, but the number 27 non-conference strength of schedule. So South Carolina has them beat in a lot of different aspects. And I think just given the way this team has responded since the loss to UConn a few weeks ago, they've played very good basketball. And I think you can argue they just beat, besides UCLA, they just pounded the number, at the time, Texas was ranked as the number 1 team in the country in the AP poll. So I know the coin flip will say otherwise, that they were the number 2 seed and stuff in the SEC tournament, but South Carolina dominated Texas in a 19-point win. So they've done that twice this year against the Longhorns. And so I think given everything I kind of just said, I feel like South Carolina should be the top overall seed, though I wouldn't be shocked if UCLA, and even then, I don't even know if it really matters too much because they're both going to be hosting the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament here in a few weeks.
Yeah, I think to your point, it's the dominance that came with that win over Texas in the championship game on Sunday. I think that puts South Carolina obviously in an even better position to potentially capture that number 1 overall seed for the women's NCAA tournament. But yeah, Dawn Staley talked about that strength of schedule. And Jack, it's something that we talk about all the time, not just in basketball. We've had this conversation numerous times about the college football playoff. And it's like, okay, you're playing these difficult teams. And does that matter when it comes to who is the number 1 overall seed? Obviously, a little different when you're talking football and basketball. But when you look at it as a whole, why are teams pushing themselves from the standpoint of we're going to play these difficult teams in the non-conference schedule, whatever sport it may be, if you aren't going to receive the benefits of that when it comes to postseason play? So I think for South Carolina, that's the argument, right? It's like, yeah, there were a couple losses in there that weren't the best, but when you look at it from a holistic standpoint, South Carolina had a really, really difficult schedule. And as you mentioned, in a lot of those categories, a harder schedule than what we're seeing from UCLA. So I think that's kind of what it comes down to. I think right now we don't have a super clear answer as to whether or not South Carolina will be that number 1 overall seed. But as you said, I mean, they're going to host. So at the end of the day, it's not the biggest deal, but you do also want to be able to say you're the number 1 overall seed. There's some bragging rights that come with that. When a push comes to shove, though, you get into the tournament, you want to obviously just win games and make it as far as you can. And the seeding kind of, goes away at that point. But yeah, I think for South Carolina, it is the strength of schedule. I think that's what's important here. And that's something that Dawn Staley talked about as well.
If it really comes down to anything, like if the committee can just not make a decision on it because it's so split down the middle in terms of these teams are just head and shoulders the best in the country, I think the one thing that you could probably chalk it up to in terms of how you decide this whole thing maybe just comes down to the matchup from all the way back in November, though I don't think that's the best way to look at it because both those teams are so much different than they are now. Like, UCLA's only real losses since that game or since beating South Carolina were the 2 regular season losses to Southern Cal, another top team in the country. And then South Carolina, they have the losses to Texas on the road and then the blowout loss at home to UConn. But I think given the fact that I think South Carolina's got the better resume, despite the losses, I think they deserve to be the 1 seed or the top overall seed. But if you really are having a tough time making the decision, I think the easy cop-out would be just to look at the head-to-head, and that maybe makes the decision for them.
Yeah, well, we'll see how things turn out. We got Selection Sunday coming up here this Sunday, the Women's Selection Sunday show at 8 p.m. So certainly looking forward to it. And you can head over to GamecockCentral.com. We'll have all of the coverage on that. A bunch of stuff coming out content-wise, article-wise over there, not just about the women's team, about the men's team as well. We have stuff coming out about football every day, and we're talking baseball because we are in the middle of baseball season 2. But Jack, before we get to talking about baseball, and there's a point there we've got from Jeff 2001. Let's talk a little men's basketball first. So obviously you are in Nashville right now for the SEC men's basketball tournament. South Carolina has a tall task tomorrow taking on Arkansas, but it is a team that they beat at the beginning of this month, and they didn't just beat them, they did a pretty good job. That was, I think, their best game so far of the season. And, you know, Jack, when you look at it, heading into tomorrow's game, you had the chance to go to both teams' open practices earlier today in Nashville. What is it going to take? Or I guess maybe the first question I should ask you is, how realistic do you think it is that South Carolina would be able to take down this Arkansas team twice in the span of a couple of weeks?
It's very much possible they could do it again. I mean, they showed how well they played in that game against Arkansas on March 1st, which was only from today, 10 days ago. So it's very recent. It's not like they played this game back in mid-February and Arkansas just got embarrassed in that game. Like, they just did not play well at all. And when you shoot 12.5% in the first half and only score 14 points before halftime, I've genuinely never seen anything like that before. And to see them play as bad as they did, like, the final score does not even reflect. If South Carolina had a better offense outside of Colin Murray-Boyles, because that was less than a 20-point, that was a 20-point game at the break, that's probably a game that is over with like a 30-point deficit or worse if you have an elite offense to counteract what you did on defense. But I do think the fact that it is so recent, Lamont Paris was talking about today, you don't really need to change everything because you did so much so well in that game. You can expect Arkansas to make adjustments, no doubt about it. They're going to probably try to put more pressure on Colin Murray-Boyles, who had 35 points in that game, and they're probably going to try to do some other things differently. But personnel-wise, Arkansas is still going to probably be down their two leading scorers, specifically with Fierro, who is just a guy that obviously is missing as the main forward on this team to probably go up against CMB and Nick Pringle. But I think the matchup does play a little bit into this game just because it was so recent. But at the end of the day, you got to show up and play well in the court. And if South Carolina doesn't play well in the court, they're not going to be able to win this game. They play anywhere near what they did the last time these two teams met. You have a pretty good feeling about this game. I think this was probably, of any draw they could have in the SEC tournament for the first round, this is the one that I think is probably the most favorable.
Well, the game at the beginning of March between these two teams was obviously a bright spot in the season for South Carolina. And it's been a season that has been disappointing. I mean, you said it, Jack, and I think everybody kind of knows it. There were maybe some higher expectations for the group heading into this year that weren't necessarily met, but you've got the SEC tournament here this week. And even though South Carolina has had kind of a tough go of it throughout the majority of this season, you were at open practice earlier today. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what were the vibes like? How would you kind of assess what the morale was for the team today from what you saw?
Yeah, I don't think you would if you didn't know anything about this team, you would probably suspect this is a team that just has good vibes. And, you know, the way Colin Murray-Boyles put it today is, look, this season's been so hard, like, no doubt about it. But there's nothing to lose, in his opinion, in this game. Like, if you lose this game, your season's over. That's as simple as that. You win, you survive another day, and you potentially, you know, look towards maybe you got to win 5 games in 5 days to make the NCAA tournament at this point as an automatic bid. So I feel like the pressure is not on them necessarily. It's more so on Arkansas when you really think about it, because if South Carolina were to win this game tomorrow, that is 2 losses to the Gamecocks on the Razorbacks' resume. And as a team that is on the bubble of making the tournament, I think they are in right now where things stand. But if they were to lose this game tomorrow, I think it would probably hurt them a bit to where Selection Sunday, they may get in, but it might be like a first four game, or maybe they're sweating it to where they don't even make the tournament, right? Like, you don't want to lose twice in a season to the last place team in the 16-team SEC. So I think the pressure is not on South Carolina, and the vibes were definitely good today at practice. I think they were good on both sides, specifically South Carolina. Like, you wouldn't know this is a team that is 2-16 in league play. Like, they're having fun out there.
Good. Well, that's certainly good to hear. And, as you mentioned, South Carolina would obviously have to get that automatic bid to make the NCAA tournament. There's no other way besides that for the Gamecocks, unfortunately, just due to the season and what's already happened. But, Jack, it is interesting because you talk about Arkansas and the guys that they don't have, and obviously just having lost to South Carolina, the pressure that they have, being a group that kind of is on the bubble right now in at this point based on what you think, but could be kind of a fringe team as you head into Selection Sunday. So when you think about what South Carolina can do, and obviously Lamont Paris kind of talked about it, you don't want to change too much, but when you think about what they can do to limit Arkansas, but also maximize their opportunities tomorrow, what do you think the keys are for the Gamecocks?
I think just plain and simple, you got to continue to feed CMB and Nick Pringle the ball. You see what they did last time they matched up against Arkansas. And I mentioned Theo before, who just isn't probably going to be available. He hasn't played in so long. So he's probably not going to be available for this game tomorrow. And you saw what South Carolina did against Big Z, the transfer from Kentucky that followed Coach Cal to Arkansas. I mean, that's the matchup that South Carolina dominated, with CMB having 35 points and then Pringle having almost a double-double with 18 points and 9 rebounds. So I don't know if Arkansas necessarily has the firepower to kind of go up against these two. And if CMB is having his way out there, I think it could be a long afternoon for the Razorbacks. Like, that is got to be priority number one for Arkansas, to stop Colin Murray-Boyles, because if you stop him, that makes things a lot tougher on South Carolina, to where you saw guys step up in the Tennessee game, for instance, where CMB had 7 points, but Jamari Thomas, Pringle, they had pretty good games. So they were able to stay in that game till the end. But if you can have CMB be CMB tomorrow, like, you don't need 35 points, but you get a 25-point game, nearly a double-double and some blocks and steals, you like your chances. So that's number one. But I think also just playing good defense against this team. That was the key last time when you held them to under 30% shooting. If you can almost replicate that and continue to play the way you have been on defense, I think that's enough of a recipe to go out here and win this game, especially on a neutral site floor where you've struggled on the road this season. But I think even being away from home, I think having this first game of the tournament so early in the day, to where it's not a huge game, not a huge crowd, that might benefit South Carolina.
Well, overall, I am very excited about this SEC men's basketball tournament. I mean, wow, like, what an unbelievable field. And we talk about how talented the SEC is this year. Yes, South Carolina did not have a good year, but you also have to think about the teams that they were playing throughout this year. I mean, just unreal from when you look at it, how good these teams are in the SEC. So, Jack, when you look at this tournament, who do you think is going to win?
Well, I don't think it's going to be South Carolina. I think realistically, you see South Carolina. I think South Carolina's going to win tomorrow, though, and then they'll give Ole Miss a little bit of a scare, I think, considering that game was so close not too long ago. But I don't know. I like Florida. I think Florida is a team that has a lot of talent. I think they're have the best bigs maybe in the SEC. So I like Florida to win this whole thing. I think one of those teams that has the double bye will probably end up winning the tournament.
Well, we'll have to see. South Carolina going head-to-head with Arkansas tomorrow afternoon from Nashville, Tennessee. Jack Veltri is going to be there. He'll keep you updated with everything that you need to know, hoping for at least one win for the men's team in this tournament. I feel like that would be a nice way to end the season. I mean, obviously they win, they continue, but you don't expect them to win the whole thing. But at least if you finish your season at the SEC tournament, having won at least one game, I feel like at this point you have to look for the positives where you can find the positives with the season that hasn't exactly gone to plan, and that would certainly be a positive. So we will see what happens against South Carolina. Took down Arkansas just a couple of weeks ago, not even a couple of weeks ago, beginning of March. So we'll see if they can replicate a similar performance. It was a very solid performance by the Gamecocks and certainly able to limit a lot of what Arkansas does from an offensive standpoint. So hoping for more of that tomorrow. Jack, any final thoughts on basketball, women's or men's, before we transition and start to talk a little baseball?
Yeah, I mean, look, the programs are on polar opposites right now, with the women gunning for a national championship, potentially 2 in a row, and the men are looking at a long off season. So look, for my side of covering the men's team all year and stuff, it's been a disappointing year, no doubt. But, crazy things are happening right now in college basketball. You see a team like Delaware, who's got the same record as South Carolina, running through their conference tournament to the championship game. And if they win the 5th game in 5 days, they're going dancing. So it's not impossible. It just happens that you're in the toughest conference in college basketball this season. So it would be South Carolina's luck, though, to lose all these close games during the year and take themselves out of a tournament bid to winning 5 games in 5 days. It wouldn't shock me if they went out here and did that. It also wouldn't shock me if they just lost tomorrow. So we will see what happens.
Jack is always going to give it to us completely real. That is always the fact here on Gamecock Central Live. He's going to tell you what he means for real. Yeah, that's why they play these tournaments, right? Like, no one's expecting South Carolina to win, but hey, maybe they will. You never know. That's why they play. So we'll have to see, and obviously a lot of expectations for the women's team as we get ready for Selection Sunday and they try to make a run in the NCAA tournament. So I'm certainly looking forward to that. I do have to say, I spent all college basketball season covering the High Point Panthers men's team, and they just won the Big South tournament. So they are tournament.
I saw that.
Very excited about that. I'm just going to put it out there. I think that they could certainly be a Cinderella story in this tournament. That is a talented team. So I know High Point, but I will say that team is very good, and they've got a ton of depth on their bench. So we'll see, but certainly happy for them after that big win on Sunday over Winthrop. They are now headed to the tournament. Jack, enough basketball talk here. Let's get into baseball. But before we do, a shout out to another sponsor here on GC Live.
Yeah. Let's talk about Prize Picks. So if you're unaware, Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in all of North America. They're the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It is just you against the numbers. So instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 players' stat projections. And then, of course, watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks has quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. It's what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. I've used Prize Picks before, plenty in the past, and I highly recommend it. You got spring training baseball going on right now. College basketball is in the month of March, so you know what that means. It's in the thick of things. NBA is going on. NHL is obviously continuing on. And no football, but a lot of other sports going on right now. So if you're interested, just go to prizepicks.com or download the PrizePicks app and use the code on screen, GC, that stands for Gamecock Central, to receive a guaranteed $50 once you play $5 in lineups.
I'm like trying to look up very quickly the New York Islanders. They play tonight.
They play the Kings, I think. It's been a weird year. It's been so strange. Yep, they trade Brock Nelson, and my heart's shattered after that one. So,
I'm sorry, Jack. Well, yeah, we'll see. This isn't a hockey podcast, but I always like to keep up with Jack. So once baseball starts here in a couple weeks, we'll get some check-ins from Jack on the Yankees.
Mm-hmm.
See how it goes for the Yankees this year. Really sad about the Cole news. That's a huge one.
Sad. Broke my heart. It's so sad.
It is. It is really sad. We wish him the best. Garrett, I know you're not watching this, but I wish you the best in a very speedy and full recovery. Absolutely. But speaking of baseball, in the midst of spring training right now for professional baseball, in the midst of the season for college baseball, I'm actually sitting here right now at Truist Field where South Carolina will take on UNC on March 25th. So everyone come on out here to Charlotte and join us for that game. But before that, South Carolina has got a lot more on the schedule, and they have a big-time matchup this upcoming weekend against Oklahoma to open up SEC play. Before that, they've got a midweek game against Georgia State. They're coming off of a weekend sweep, so a lot going on for South Carolina. Still those only 3 losses against Clemson. Jack and I didn't do GC Live last week, so we didn't have the chance to talk about it, but we're not going to talk about it. That was talked enough about over on GamecockCentral.com. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what is to come. You saw some good stuff out of South Carolina this past weekend. I want to start, though, from a pitching perspective, because I think just from a concern standpoint, this is something you brought up as well, Jack, in one of your articles, is the length of starting pitchers, how long they're going into these games. Not getting past 5 innings, if I read that correctly and saw it correctly, right? Mm-hmm. No starting pitcher last weekend went past 5 innings for South Carolina. That's,
Yeah, it's a little concerning. I think it's also just take it with a grain of salt, because it is one time through the rotation where that happened. Because you got to remember, the week prior, outside of Matthew Becker, the other 2 starters were phenomenal against Clemson. Jake McCoy shut down that order with 12 strikeouts over 6 innings, and Dylan Eskew also pitched very well, giving up 1 run over 6 innings. So it's a small sample size to where with McCoy, you have to remember circumstances that he had to deal with the 3rd inning, which South Carolina scored 7 runs on Saturday, and that took nearly 40 minutes. And when he went back out on the mound, he was obviously very, I guess cold is the right word in pitching lingo, I guess, in terms of just he didn't really, Pulmonary had asked him during that stretch where South Carolina was just scoring at a high rate, do you want to go out and have a catch outside to stay loose? And McCoy declined, and Maneri mentioned after that it was like McCoy felt lazy, I guess. So you hope that doesn't happen again, because he gave up 5 or 4 runs in that 4th inning that ended his day. And then Eskew, he didn't pitch bad. It's just he couldn't command the zone. Again, he didn't give up a run or anything over his 3 innings, but he had 4 walks and a hit by pitch, so that's not ideal. So you worry about those guys a little bit, but not too much, because they have shown to be very good. Matthew Becker, though, on the other hand, he pitched on Friday. He didn't look very good. Made it through the 1st inning, no problem. Retired the side in order, but it's that 2nd inning where he had some unfortunate luck. He got hit around a little bit and gave up some runs. And Maneri decided to take him out only after an inning and 2/3. So I think you're going to see a little bit of shakeup in the rotation this week. With, I think Brandon Stone deserves to be starting on maybe Fridays, maybe Saturdays, who knows, but he deserves to be in the rotation. And then you keep things the same with McCoy and Eskew, and move Becker to the bullpen and hope you can use him more than once. Maybe use him in the closer role. I'm not sure, but things are probably going to change going into this weekend. We don't know the rotation yet, but I'm sure Paul will reveal that here pretty soon.
Well, we talked about the way that we felt like Matthew Becker could be used in multiple different roles throughout the season. So if you do see him shift out of that starting role into a guy that's coming out of your bullpen, it's something that we did talk about at the top of the season as well. But it is interesting, Jack, because you talk about a pitcher getting cold, if you will, especially when the offense is out there for a while. And, it takes some time to get back out on the mound. And that can be hard. That's conversations I've had with some of our guys here at the AAA level. I mean, it's kind of a little bit of give and take, right? It's like, yeah, offensively, you want the bats to be going. Keep passing the bat. Hitting is contagious. Obviously, they always say it. But in the same, kind of conversation, you're talking about your pitcher, your starting pitcher, sitting there and potentially getting a little cold, which can be difficult. But nonetheless, South Carolina is still coming away with 3 wins last weekend, which was necessary. It was needed. Those are games you've got to win if you're South Carolina. Same with the game tomorrow against Georgia State. But then you look ahead to this weekend, your first SEC matchup against Oklahoma. I think this one's going to be interesting, Jack. What are your initial thoughts on this matchup?
It's where you separate the boys from the men, I think, is the best way to put it, just because, look, people, right or wrong, they don't care what South Carolina did against Morehead State and Sacred Heart and Milwaukee. They care only about what you did against Clemson, and I think that is a kind of bogus way to kind of look at the season, because every game matters, obviously. But to some fans out there, the Clemson series is the end-all, be-all to judge a team, and you got swept by them. So you didn't play your best against your best in competition in non-conference play, and now you got to go out here in SEC play and prove those people wrong and see what you can do. So I think it's a really big test for South Carolina. It's a big test for Oklahoma, their first SEC series of the year, or just in the SEC in general. I think, though, for South Carolina, the fact that the series is at Founders Park, it's going to be nice this weekend. It should be a little bit warm. The ball should be flying off the bat. I think that helps South Carolina, and assuming they get their pitching rotation plans figured out to where it's probably Stone, Eskew, and McCoy in some order, you're feeling pretty good about what those guys can give you, because pitching, I think, wins you series at the end of the day. And if you have enough timely offense, you can win a series this weekend. So not looking for a sweep or anything. A series loss doesn't do anything bad either, I don't think, because it's so early, because you have 30 games in conference play. But you would like to win this weekend and take 2 out of 3, maybe even sweep.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about a series loss there. And again, it is early in SEC play. South Carolina just opening up SEC play this coming weekend against Oklahoma. But also there's something to be said, I think, about setting the tone if you're South Carolina, especially because you mentioned it. I mean, kind of the only opponent that a lot of people are really circling so far that South Carolina has played is Clemson. And unfortunately, you got swept in that series as the Gamecocks. So you want to come out here and make somewhat of a statement, I think, against Oklahoma. And I think that looks like at least 2 wins this upcoming weekend. And Jack, when you look at this matchup between these two teams, who are those key guys for South Carolina? You know, we talked about the starting pitching, obviously needing to be solid, needing to be shored up this weekend. But who are some of those guys from an offensive standpoint that you feel like really need to step up to the plate, no pun intended, against a team like Oklahoma to get your SEC play started on the right foot?
I'm going to mention guys that maybe haven't performed as well as like Ethan Petrie, Nathan Hall, players like that. I think you need to see more out of the catcher position, obviously. And that is something that has just been kind of a work in progress this entire season so far, because Talmadge Lecroy has been banged up a bit. And I assume he'll be in the starting lineup again tomorrow, because he was able to get back in the lineup and catch the other day. But you need to see more out of him, obviously. I know he's dealing with the fractured right thumb, but that's a guy you're definitely going to need if he's going to hit in the middle of the order. I'm still kind of waiting on Kennedy Jones to be what I think many people expect him to be. And I mean, he's hitting 304 this year. He just got back from injury the other day. His numbers are fine. It's just, when is the breakout game going to kind of come along to where he's got like a 4-hit game? He's got a homer and a few ribbies. When's that going to happen? Because he's been fine, but I think you're expecting more out of your cleanup hitter. And so those are the guys in particular I'm waiting to see them really step up this weekend, because if South Carolina wants to win this series, it cannot just be Ethan Petrie and Nathan Hall at the top of the order setting the tone and doing everything. If those guys aren't on, you're going to need other guys to step up. And facing SEC pitching is never going to be easy, but if you can get Kennedy going a little bit more, if you can get Talmadge going. I mean, Talmadge Lecroy is hitting 107 right now. I know for a fact he is definitely better than what the stats show. He's just got to go out here and do it.
Jack, from what we've seen so far in the season from South Carolina, do you feel like it's been Nathan Hall who has kind of been that guy that stood out to you the most? I mean, obviously he leads the pack in terms of batting average, batting 407 right now, but has he been the one that you feel like has kind of stood out to you the most? I mean, we talk about Ethan Petrie as well, but those two guys, is there anybody else that you really think has stood out?
Yeah, I think Nathan Hall has definitely stood out. I think he and Petrie are basically 1A and 1B in terms of what they bring to the table for South Carolina. You know what you're getting out of Ethan Petrie every game, but Hall leading the team in batting average. He's got 2 homers, 14 RBI, he leads the team in hits. He's been your prototypical leadoff hitter and so much more. I think another pair of guys that I've really liked early so far, honestly 3 guys, and I'll mention them real quick: Bo Hollins, KJ Scobie, and Jordan Carrion. That is your first baseman, your third baseman, and your second baseman. So they have done awesome, not just as defenders, but at the plate too. Like Bo is hitting 370 right now. KJ's hitting 300, a quiet 300, if I may add. And Jordan Carrion is quickly kind of shifted into the starting second base role since Nolan Naraki had a really rough weekend against Clemson. And he's been, I think, your tone setter at the bottom of the order. Like, he's your 9-hole hitter. You're feeling pretty good about him because he can bunt better than anyone on this team. He's got good speed, and he's got a really good glove. So he does a lot of the little things right, and I think that's what you definitely need. So there's a lot of promise with especially the young guys like Bo and KJ being freshmen.
Well, we talk about this matchup this upcoming weekend against Oklahoma, and we've mentioned this for a while now, right? Like once you get into SEC play, you kind of see how you stack up against these other teams. And the SEC, we talked about it with men's basketball. We'll talk about it with baseball too, how good the SEC is at baseball. And that's just been how it is in the SEC for years. That is the expectation now. So you're South Carolina, you're getting into conference play, you're seeing where you stack up. South Carolina wasn't necessarily picked at the top of the season to perform particularly well in SEC play. And obviously, we haven't seen other teams play full SEC schedules yet. But when you look at getting into this weekend, Jack, what is your confidence level for the Gamecocks when it comes to how well you think they should perform in conference play?
I think I'll like a good 7 on the scale of 0 to 10. I think is my confidence this weekend because I think it's so new in the year to where if you told anyone, at least tell me, like if South Carolina, let's say they win tomorrow and they're 15-3 going into SEC play, you give someone a blindfold and tell them that's the record, I think you'll like it. Like take out the fact that they got swept by Clemson. I know people are going to say, oh, well, they haven't played anyone this year. Okay, sure. I'll give you that. But also they've done what they've needed to do, right? They'd be 15-3 and it's no gimme tomorrow against Georgia State, but you go into SEC play with that type of record, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. And like all you need to really do, Paul Maneri put it really perfectly one time. I can't remember when exactly he said it, but you're probably going to go 10-10 in 20 of your 30 SEC games. It's about what you do in the other 10 games that matters so much. Go back to last year. Look at how many little things that hurt South Carolina, whether it was a defensive mishap or not being able to hit with runners in scoring position, not being able to get that big out that you need. That is why South Carolina lost so many tight games last year. And I think you're seeing a team so far this year that has shown they can come up in the clutch when they need to. And it may not always be perfect. You won a game 1-0 the other day, but you pitched well enough to win and you got the timely hit you needed and you played great defense. So you do all those things this weekend. I like your chances to win this series.
And then as we continue to look forward to more series, we will see how things go for South Carolina. You say timely hitting. I feel like I say timely hitting 100 times a week when I'm talking about these. I mean, it's really true. Like when you look at reasons why teams lose, I mean, there's bunch of different factors that go to it, but a lot of the times you are talking about timely hitting. I mean, you're talking about pitching as well, but when you've got runners in scoring position, it's critical, right? And that's something we talked about so much last year with South Carolina's baseball team in the 2024 season, struggling on that side of things. So for the Gamecocks, I do think it is really important to come out this weekend and set a strong tone when it comes to SEC play, because their schedule is not going to get any easier. And we know that, and we have talked about it, and we will continue to talk about it here on GC Live. It does not get easier playing in the SEC as they continue in conference play. So yeah, you've got those 3 losses. They're all against Clemson. That's what everybody's thinking about right now. But I think this is a chance this weekend for South Carolina to just take it as a reset. Like I think if you can win this series this weekend, there's some restored hope in this team, because we saw after South Carolina got swept by Clemson, and I understand it. Like it is frustrating to watch that. You don't want to see that, especially when you come into the year with a new coach, new guys on the team, kind of a new sense of what could be, and you've got some expectations, then you lose all 3 games to Clemson. It's a bummer. But this weekend, I think a chance for South Carolina to kind of take it as a reset. And I do think if they win the series, it does kind of restore some of that hope that I think may have been a little bit lost after that Clemson sweep, Jack.
Definitely. Like, again, you're going to have people that overreact if South Carolina loses the game on Friday. But you know what? It's why it's a 3-game series. They go out here and win 2 of 3 and at least show that they can go out here and play competitive baseball against a quality team like Oklahoma and win that series this weekend. You're feeling very good. And look, SEC play after that is going to pick up tremendously. That's why it's so important to not get swept this weekend. At least take a game and hopefully win the series, honestly, because you go to Arkansas the week after, and then you're home versus the defending champs in Tennessee. So It's only going to get tougher from here. Win the series this weekend, and you see what happens from there. Get off to a good start and instill confidence in this fan base, and more importantly, the players that want to go out here and win this so bad.
Jack, what is your plan? I mean, obviously, you got to see what happens with the men's team. They're still playing on Saturday.
Yeah. Oh,
in
gosh.
Nashville, you won't be at the Oklahoma-South Carolina game.
No, if however far this team goes in basketball, I will be here for. I packed, I think, 3 outfits for games just to be safe. Because I don't know. I think they'll win tomorrow, like I said, but then after that, you never know what can happen. So I will be here as long as they are, and if that means I have to miss baseball, I will unfortunately be okay with that. So,
well, there you have it, everybody. Jack Veltri just working so hard for all of you, making sure we have the best coverage over on GamecockCentral.com. We talked about a lot today: women's basketball, men's basketball.
We did.
Baseball. We got to a lot of stuff here on GC Live, and it was a rare Tuesday edition of GC Live with Jack and I. At least we're usually on Wednesday. So we're very appreciative of all of you coming out here and joining us here on this Tuesday evening edition of GC Live. We hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, a great rest of your week, everybody. Next week, I will be out at spring training, so you probably will not see me on GC Live next week, but we will pick back up after that. And as always, visit GamecockCentral.com. And don't forget, watch the men's team tomorrow against Arkansas. It's going to be a big game, everybody. But thanks so much for joining us here. Again, I'm Kendall Smith. He's Jack Veltri. We will see you guys soon. Have a great day.